Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio, and I'm your host, Michael Ryce. Jeanie is not going to be with us today. We're taking care of babies today, so she's tied up in that wondrous opportunity. And a delight to have you here. I see Cary, you're with us, and I know you had a question or two for us. So if you want to just jump in, Cary, with your question, if you hit that call button, then we can rock and roll. Also, I see Terry's there, and Terry was doing some processing yesterday. So, Terry, if you have any additional thoughts, any support needed, how that mind shifter went for you yesterday, would love to hear your voice. Push that caller button, and we will be saying hello. Oh, call just came in, but then it disappeared. Let's try again. Welcome, Susan. And again, the caller button lit up, but then disappeared. So if you want to just try once more, if you have a thought for us, question, answer, idea. There we go. The caller button's open again, and it's Cary. Welcome, young lady. How
Hi
are things
there.
in Mexico?
Very good. Can you hear me?
You're loud and clear. Gotcha.
Oh, good. Great. Yeah, I ended up reading your discussion on ending war the other day. Very good, very powerful. A lot of information there. Um,
Put a few hours into that article,
Boy, I'll say.
and I think
But
Jeannie's got it on the website if anybody's interested
oh, nice.
in looking at it, or you can drop Jeannie an email, JEANIE at whyagain.org, and she'll get a copy to you. If it's not, I'm not sure 100% if it's on the website. But go for it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What struck you? What hit you? Where the questioning part? Any fill-ins you can see? I would be delighted to hear.
Man, just a lot to it. But it's all really basically right in line with everything else you teach about um, healing and healing from within, transforming ourselves. Um, Even fear and denial project conflict into the world, perpetuating cycles of war. And
Yes.
is war really out there? I mean, or is it just coming from in here? We can see it because we have it inside of us.
Reflection.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Max Planck, physicist who won the Nobel Prize in physics for discovering quantum theory, said when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yes.
And that's a powerful statement, really, of creatorship. It's interesting that in the original, you go back to the Aramaic language, and it's informing us of our creatorship, and probably one of the greatest atrocities done to us as human beings down through the ages, and that we bought into, is that we've hidden from ourselves the fact that we are creative beings. And so even physics is is coming around to the same conclusion. Hey, you're a creator. Time
Right.
to wake up to that process and look at what it is you're creating your life out of.
Right. And there's been so many distractions in the culture, different programs that have hidden from us that we're creators. And
Yes.
I think that's what this great awakening is about that's going on the planet right now, that people are beginning to realize it's great that it's in so many different areas of conventional um, writing and speaking, the Joe Dispenzas, the Greg Bradens, that people are waking up to that we are creators. And I see more and more things all the time of, you know, sometimes people say to us, well, what do you think about that war over there? And we say,
Oh, your voice cut off, Carrie. Not sure what happened. Did you hit a mute button or anything, Cary?
Interesting. I'll tell you what happened,
Oh,
and just so you
there
know,
you
for
are, and you're
future
100%
people.
clear now.
Right. So I had my phone sitting there, and it went to sleep. So it made
Ah,
the security screen or whatever. I
right.
probably could change timing on that, but I
Yes.
wasn't paying attention. We have to keep tapping to keep ourselves on here,
Ah, okay.
present and accounted for. But what I was saying is, people say to us, well, what do you think about that war? And my husband is fond of saying, well, I don't. I think about what I'm working on internally to change. And, the reflection is there to remind us, and then we have to do our work.
For
So,
sure. One of the things often people ask, like Ari, our granddaughter, who's been circling the earth for 6 years, will say, well, how old is she? And when I respond, she isn't, people kind of like shake their heads and
right,
quizzically look at what do you mean she isn't? Well, she isn't. And people have to start to rethink what they've been brainwashed to believe.
right, yes. And I think that is a part of the program, how old we are. Celebrating birthdays. So we're counting the years until we supposedly die when life is eternal.
Exactly.
So clearing our own emotional wounds. I've been having an interesting experience with just listening to um, codependence to interdependence again and realizing that I've done a lot of clearing on a lot of more blatant levels, but I can see a whole lot of little subtle things coming up that are still in there. And as I do those, I can think to myself, oh, my grandmother used to do this. And so I'm seeing these generational patterns rising to the surface. And, we ask ourselves, how long do I have to keep clearing? Well, I have to keep clearing until the only thing I experience is pure love. And that's, um, on a lot of the time, and then sometimes it's not. So
Right.
the work is always, for me, I'm finding, more and more subtle things to work on. And I'd really like to see us change how life operates on this planet.
I join you 2000% in that.
Yeah.
That's
So
exactly what we're here to support.
yes. So the generational trauma I see popping up, um, I wouldn't call it trauma, but behavioral patterns, which is, if it's not love, it's trauma. Um, and I guess I'm curious of any suggestions on how to keep deepening that besides just doing worksheets on the layers that come up.
One of probably the most uh, profoundly impactful thing to do is to change regulatory speech, to change language,
Mm,
because mind, that Harvard research that we talk about so often, it says in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. 9 bits out of 10,000 brain cells firing, and it's been estimated there are perhaps 20 trillion bits of data in the world in that same time frame, which is about a 25th of a second. And what you realize when you look at those numbers is that the 9-bit mind, the perceptual constructs of our mind, are literally simply evidence asked for by our words.
mm,
And the habitual denial in our culture, the habitual language, the words we use of, something as simple as, well, that made me feel bad. Well, now I just said to my mind, you have some bad feelings in there, quote unquote, bad feelings, but we're not going to look at them as ours. What I want is evidence that shows me that made me feel bad. And that
yes.
piece of denial changes. I mean, it's literally our regulatory speech is an instruction set to our mind as to how to structure the
Mm,
way we see the world.
yeah,
So really paying attention to language, I think, is one of the biggest keys in the whole process.
that's really great observation. And that's, you said hello to me living in Mexico. And we've chosen to live in a quiet, beautiful little area where our lives are quiet. We don't deal with a lot of traffic and highways and shopping, places and all that kind of thing. But I do notice that I see a dog on the street that I feel sorry for. I feel sad for that poor dog. It's,
So
you know,
there's so
and
listen to that
yeah,
sentence,
right.
and that's denial.
Okay.
So
And in
so
what way
if
is
if
it
you were to if you
denial?
were to if you were to language accurately, you would say, "Gee, I see a dog in a difficult situation, and it brings up sadness in me." Now I've
Right.
said to my mind, I have sadness, and it's okay to show me that it's mine rather than, oh, I feel sad for that dog.
Right.
And that's how subtle it can be.
Yeah. And then what does a worksheet like that look like?
A worksheet on that situation with the
Well,
dog?
yeah, because it's pretty
Yeah,
common. I mean, it's
yeah,
pretty common. It's one of the things where we help run spay and neuter clinics, and we've raised, litters of kittens that were dumped out, and to not, and I realized that me feeling, this is some of my subtle layers, feeling sorry for the
right.
animals is part of my, okay, that's some of my old data, generational or lifetime, whatever it is, that uh, I I need to work on.
Right. So,
And
so let's take that simple statement of, I was sad when I saw the condition of that dog. So that
right.
worksheet would look like, I'd start out with the object of attention would be the dog, or the
Right.
object of attention might be myself. I could do a worksheet on both aspects of that circumstance. But if number one C was the dog and the situation is the dog's in painful circumstances, so that would be the starting point, and then going back to I, Cary, who am love, feel sadness.
Hmm.
What's the thought that generates that sadness? Start to identify that thought. And so if I look at it, it's well, I think the dog's experiencing pain or abuse.
Right. Or
And
it
so,
doesn't have enough food. That's pretty common. Not enough food, not enough care,
right.
um, and possibly sickness, depending on how deteriorated it is.
Okay.
Um,
So you just came up with three different worksheets
okay. Right.
because the goal is the key. So notice in the circumstance we just described with the dog, there are three different goals that could resonate sadness in you that you project into your brain's image of the circumstance the dog is in. One, the goal would be I want the dog to have abundant food to be well fed. Two would be I want the dog to be well taken care of. Now, those two different goals would take you into different files, so to speak, in the mind to clean out content. And that's a really important point in the whole forgiveness process is that in order for a worksheet to be effective and reach into the depth that's possible in my mind around any given issue, I have to really locate the goal that's driving that process. Uh, you know, think about a recruiter. Imagine you've got a child that's a basketball star and, they're in high school and the recruiter comes along for the college teams. The recruiter comes in and is looking for someone that they can get a hold of and invite to their college, blah blah blah. They're good enough to help our team, and all the things that go with that. So if you think of a goal as a recruiter, when I set a goal through resonance, the vibration, the energetic pattern of that goal is going to literally go through in just an instant. I forget exactly what the numbers are, but they've actually measured the time it takes from where perception starts and the mind actually generates its reality. So there's that instant where resonance, the goal for the dog to be well fed, is going to filter through everything in my mind, which includes everything in my genetics regarding food. And if 20 generations ago, the culture was in such a terrible shape, and someone with great empathy for animals watched these animals starve, that literally that vibration in the genes from 20 years ago is going to be recruited into activity, and that might be the real root of the sadness. But if you, let's say, for instance, take that as an example, but let's say that you did just a kind of a random goal. Well, I want all dogs to be taken care of. That's not, that goal is not going to recruit that specific energetic pattern from 20 generations ago out of your genes. And so using that as a goal on the worksheet isn't going to produce the healing result that it really could. And so, becoming skilled at really looking at what is the key issue in the circumstance that you're dealing with and coming up with the goal that will literally recruit into activity, or pardon me, identify the goal that has recruited into activity, whatever it has recruited. And then by canceling that goal, the driver that recruits all that data and assembles it into a picture that I call the world I think is out there, but is really the world painted on the inside of my eyeballs. When I cancel that recruiter, when I cancel that goal, that picture collapses. Now, the conscious space, that 9-bit space, can be infilled with active present love. And the part of the structure, i.e., something in my genes from 20 generations ago, when I cancel that goal, that energy that was recruited into this perceptual construct that I call sadness about the starving dogs, that construct, when the goal is canceled, collapses back into the unconscious. And that's what gives me access to that hidden data in my mind if I'm still, if I'm quiet, if I'm really listening. So the idea of canceling the goal is to, and it took me 35 years of working with Yeshua's first century Aramaic ideas to understand this one simple principle. When, and it fits with that statement I use it all the time from Carl Jung: until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. How do you make the unconscious conscious? You look at the recruiter, the goal that called this particular data into activity from wherever in my structure it is. And then in Aramaic, the word forgive, shabag, or shabak, is to cancel that goal. And if I follow that collapse into its footprint, I've got access to my own unconscious. Now I've made the unconscious conscious. Put Yeshua together from 2,000 years ago and Carl Jung, and there it is. And it's the only way that I know of, that I've found in 50 years of searching, that someone can consistently, persistently drop into the hidden parts of their own minds, which oftentimes are generations and generations and generations old, and clean those hidden parts up. Otherwise, most people live in the dynamics that come from the unconscious, but all they see is the tip of the iceberg. They never see the root. You look at that story in the Old Testament about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years, and most people think that's a story about a group of people who probably weren't very bright because they didn't even know where the sun came up and where the sun set. Obviously, they knew quite well how astronomy works. So uh, they weren't talking about a group of people lost in a hot, sandy place that was 35 square miles or so. They were talking about those who were stuck living out of perceptual constructs created out of their own unconscious minds. And if you look at the way that they got out of the desert, what happened? What did they have to do? They said the old generation had to die off. And that didn't mean that everybody in old physical bodies has to physically die. The root of the word generation is genare, it means cause, that we have to access every cause in us that lends our creatorship to the exact opposite of what we say we want. We need to drop into that part of our own minds, bring it forward to conscious awareness. Now, there are two different ways that things show up when they do come forward. One is it can be just processed as energy. The other is, and it tends to get more complicated, the other is that it forms perceptions, and you have to work through the stories, you know, the he said, she said, they said. But if you simply cancel a goal and breathe, and asking the breath to go to depth, to scoop into the depth of your own genetics, the depths of your own cellular structure, your own family system, and clear out the energetic patterns, then you are freeing yourself from the desert. And then you get to go into the promised land, and the promised land is nothing more than the land of conscious co-creation. Oh, I'm a creator. I get to consciously create what I choose to engage in. And anytime any kind of hostility or fear sneaks into perception, I pay attention, and there's my next piece of work. Is that getting toward the refinement you're looking for? Are you with me? Did your phone go blank again? Okay, we lost her. Let's give her a second. I assume you'll dial back in again. Cary, you're still showing that you're on the show, but your phone call has disappeared. And Susan, thank you for the note. And you could just, quickly before you head off with that appointment, type your note in, and we could answer, and it'll be in the archive for you too. So, and maybe you've already left. So, Miss Cary, if you can still hear me, I've lost you. Ah, there we go. Well, there's Susan. Hey, young lady.
Hey, I'm walking in, so it won't be long. But
Okay, go for it.
I have done wake up sheets where I have obviously somehow let that thing collapse into itself so I have access to something else because I've had a lot of good worksheets. But that thing that we do to let go of, well, it's the Twin Towers thing, allowing something to collapse so that we're left with an open conduit so that we can get to the unconscious. Sometime I would love to pick through that because I've never really had a feeling for that, even though what happens to me is just certain things pop into mind. I'll have a goal and I cancel a goal and I'll sit there and something pops up. And that's probably the collapsing you're talking about, but I've never experienced it as a collapsing, or maybe I haven't fully understood. Uh, and the other question I had, which I'm going to have to hang up because I'm about to go in this building, is
Okay.
just um, you talk about maybe 22 generations ago, this trauma happened. Well, maybe somebody 22 generations ago saw a lot of starving dogs, but they wouldn't have reacted in an unhealthy way. unless they already had sadness in them. I mean, where does it begin? That's just a head question, I know.
Right. Well, my take is that if any circumstance in life resonates something in me, then the file folder effect takes over, and I'm going to link those two things in my mind.
Yeah.
Once they're linked, if there's a thought disorder, if there's an energy that's off base that doesn't belong, then anything that matches what it's been linked to, it doesn't matter what it is, can be all it takes to resonate that content, to bring that content into the fray. And the idea again of canceling the goal is when that collapses, and you'll notice that when you've done a good worksheet, and here's a piece for me that's always been amazing when I do a worksheet with people is what they drop into, and all of a sudden the perceptual construct
Hmm.
that was the problem tends to take a back seat. In fact, the most
Yeah.
common response I've gotten over the years is like, I don't even know why I was upset about that. That was silly. I mean, it was such a big
Yeah.
deal before I canceled that goal. But when
Yeah.
I canceled that goal and I accessed what was really beneath it, that seemed unrelated, but it was connected. If I process through it, then
Uh-huh.
there's no oomph left to that circumstance, to that perceptual construct. I've literally forgiven the underlying trauma, and
Yeah.
I may not even understand how or that it was even connected, just that I was able to process it.
Right. In the case
That
of
would
the
be
dog,
my take.
you would still want to do something to help the dog, but it wouldn't be with that.
Yeah, I can say, gee, the dog's starving, and I want to be fully connected to my intuition because I
Right.
may have an idea of, gee, I have a can of dog food at home and I'm going to run home and get it. And if I'm wide
Right.
open in my intuition, I might just look around and there's a guy across the street and I might raise my hand and he says, yeah, I see the dog too. Hey, come on over here. We've got a whole, boatload of food. Let's get distributing it to animals. If I'd run home to get the can, I'd have missed that
Right.
opportunity. So being in my
That's
most
true. It's an open.
connected, intuitive place continuously is
Right. I'm going. I gotta go, Michael.
okay, young lady. You have a blessed one.
Thanks.
Appreciate you.
You too. Thanks a lot. Okay. Bye.
Bye bye. Okay, Cary, welcome back.
Okay. So just so you know, as far as the mechanism goes, the app, my phone did not go dark because I kept tapping on it, but somehow it blocked me out. And I tried to recall in a few times, but I had to leave the app in order to actually get through.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure exactly why that happened, but anyway, to be continued with what we were saying. If you have any questions about that, I can tell you. I did take a screenshot. I can send it to you, but
Yeah, if you would, that would be great.
okay. And then here's my thought: is my mind races ahead to doing the worksheet, and at the end of the worksheet, later in the worksheet, it says, you know, can I think of a time when I felt like this? Didn't have enough food, didn't have enough care, whatever the item that I'm doing is, and I can say yes to that, and I can feel my generations maybe. Um,
Actually, that question on the worksheet, a time when the question is when I violated that goal.
oh,
So, I go back to the goal and I look at, is there any time when I, let's say, for instance, deprived someone of food, the dog's
mm,
being deprived?
okay,
So that goal or that question is slightly different than the way you
okay,
had expressed it. And it might be useful to do it both ways, but the objective of it is to look at, is there any time I've ever been accused of whatever this goal is that
yeah.
I'm holding that has been violated?
Yeah, because I've always done it the other way. Is there any
Huh,
time when I felt like what I was wishing for that negative situation that I
right.
experienced that too? So, and as I have this awareness, and oh, shoot, are you still there?
Loud and clear. We're
Okay,
good.
and that's funny. My phone just went dark. Okay, so as I experience seeing dogs now, it's shifting as to how I'm processing that because of doing the worksheet idea along with it and forgiving the goal and seeing, oh, there's a dog. Do you have an extra food I can give it? But it's like the angst is starting to dissipate and I'm doing things that I can to resolve situations when I see them and loving that life is there in front of me. So, yeah, it's been an interesting process. And then, I asked myself about war. One of the reasons you sent me the document on healing war was because of um, me saying, I'm from bloodlines where I have Jewish on one side of the family and Lebanese or Middle Eastern on the other, or Arab on the other side,
Arab, right? Mhm.
and feeling that, watching that drama play out over many years, over my lifetime really, and asking myself, how can I help clear this? Um, and so doing more and more worksheets on it, on the things that it brings up, seem useful at the same time as just doing worksheets on whatever is coming up, like the dogs, like, feeling bad because people are getting bombed somewhere. And I don't even know that that's true. It's pictures on a TV, but that I didn't see, but pictures online. But so it's how do we really? I just love this process. I just want to say that, and just the fact that you explain it as well as you do. I think anybody would benefit from reading that article that you wrote and be able to um, comprehend at a deeper level, the world is our mirror. We are creators. How do we keep clearing ourselves of unconscious data? How do we defrag that biocomputer? How do we clear out those old resonances so that they don't have to be percolating in this world anymore?
Right. And the another thought that comes to mind when you speak of your genetic history, having a genetic connection with both the Jewish side of this conflict and the Arabic side, both sides of the family in your genes, each piece of work, however subtle, however deep it is that you can do, you literally, energetically in the quantum world, open an energetic window for both sides of that family to heal.
Yes, 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 yes. I get it. And even, like I've been doing worksheets on something that's an issue in my everyday life with another person who's visible in my world. And I go, wow, I can remember my grandma having this kind of an attitude, this kind of an opinion that I'm clearing. And, um, and seeing how it's kind of a bloodline attitude, Um, so that's really interesting too.
Well, and when you realize that the creative power that we have lies in holding on to a frequency.
Hmm.
If we hold to a frequency, even if it's, and this is where Yeshua says, resist not evil. And evil is another archery term that simply means you miss the target altogether. When he says resist not
Right.
evil, he's speaking quantum physics. He's saying if you hold the mind energy of whatever that which you consider to be evil is, and you fight against it, and you yell and scream and rage about it, and no, instead of forgive, you literally are a supporter of it in the world. You literally are setting that field up to be, by resistance, increasing its strength, which increases the presence of that energetic pattern in the world. Whereas the opposite with breath and forgiveness is, I recognize that frequency's in me. I recognize it has an impact. It doesn't feel good, and what I'm willing to do is to embrace it so fully and allow it to come forward in me with all of its you know, warts and pimples and pain, and I'm willing to breathe with it and transmute it, then you become literally a vacuum that draws that energy off of the planet, that opens a space for the healing of that energy. So, when Yeshua says a little
Mm,
leaven leavens the whole loaf, he's
yes,
not talking about bread, he's talking about critical mass and physics. And that each person who steps up to the plate and says, okay, I'm ready to face that meat. No, I'm not going to fight it, rage about it. Doesn't mean I'm not going to expose it, but I'm going to extend love toward it. I'm going to breathe in the presence of it. And each person who does that adds to the dissolution of those energetic patterns that end up in creating what we call, the world of actuality. Or the world of reality, and I love what Einstein says: reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one.
yes.
And it is. I mean, everybody who carries a certain frequency pattern experiences realities based in those patterns, even though there's nothing actual about them. They're just reflections of energetic patterns, as Einstein says, very persistent. And to me, the genius of this man Yeshua coming along 2,000 years ago with, here's how in the quantum world you dissolve those things that never belonged. You recognize that, you're a pretty happy person with everybody around you until they violate a goal that you hold for them. And then when you take responsibility and you cancel the goal, you get to collapse into the part of your mind that needs healing, the part of your genes that needs healing. And then you become a contributor to the healing of the world mind. It's just so profoundly amazing to me.
That is amazing. And you did bring up Job in that article and how uh, what he feared had come upon him. And
Yeah, that piece, that insight from Job, that it's interesting because if you actually, I don't know, based on that single sentence, read the book of Job and notice that, he does the thing that he fears, and that is he's got this fear that although he's so holy, his family won't be, his children won't be. And then all of this trauma starts to happen. In the middle of it, he has this insight: oh, that which I feared most has come upon me. But there's so much confusion in his mind that he doesn't grab it. He doesn't deal with it.
right,
He just keeps going, and all his friends come. I mean, a great deal of time goes by before he finally changes his mind and says, oh, my thinking, I'm going to change this thinking in me. And restoration occurs. And, oftentimes people catch on to the principle, but as in that story with him, well, this friend comes and he's got this opinion, and that friend comes and got that opinion, and all of a sudden, the very insight that would have brought him healing much earlier, he loses in the fray.
yeah. And then you have all those biblical stories that come after it of what people were creating out of their fear. And then you had a quote in there with Carl Jung: what we fear we create. We unconsciously shape our world based on internal conflicts and patterns mostly carried in the unconscious. And just that is so subtle and so simple and so worthy of being aware of, I think.
Absolutely. And if you add to that the insight from Max Planck as a Nobel Prize winning physicist, and I don't remember at this point, it's been a while since I read that article, whether I put this particular quote into the article or not. But Max Planck says this: in all my research, I have never come across matter. He says, my whole life has been about the clear-headed study of energy, and that he's never even run it as a physicist. He's like, it doesn't exist. When you start really looking at it, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And then he to me, this just ties right into Yeshua's insight. Like, Max came along a whole lot later, but he says this: to me, the term matter implies a bundle of energy which is given form by an intelligent spirit.
Man.
As a man who's devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of quote-unquote matter, I can tell you, as a result of my research about atoms, this much: there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this minute solar system of the atom together. And then he just, I mean, as a physicist, it's monumental. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is a matrix
Yep.
of all matter.
Yep.
Now,
Sounds like
there
you're
is
pretty good holographic projectors.
exactly. And then that last sentence from that quote to me needs one adjustment. You know, he says we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious mind. And he didn't have the idea of the unconscious. So we could literally edit that sentence just a little bit and say we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious or an unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if the mind is unconscious and it doesn't even know it's contributing the energy that's bringing this solar system of atoms together,
Right.
that's where Yeshua comes in. You know, I mean, this is such a profound piece of information from a Nobel Prize winning physicist. And then when you add that, it doesn't take a conscious mind to create results. An unconscious mind will do just as well.
Right.
And that's where when people live in denial, you know, that, you know, if you remember back in the early days of doing the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop, you know, I pretty much always had that 4x8 whiteboard, and across the top of the board would be three words. There'd be deny, suppress, and project. And that was kind of the foundation of the whole explanation.
Oh, yeah.
And it was probably after the last time you did a live workshop, I think. I'm not sure whether I had changed that intensive that you did with us up in Michigan where you did the food, which was awesome. Thank you.
Right.
But but there was a point where I was like teaching that workshop and I get this metaphorical tap on the shoulder and I'm literally told by Ruka, Michael, it's not suppress, it's dissociate. And that just changed everything about this whole
Right.
body of work. Because suppression is kind of like, well, you know, I got this thing, I kind of hide it from myself, it's suppressed, but you know, not that big a deal. But the and I mean, I can remember the day that I finally got that, or I was shown that, and that's when I started to understand that, oh, the goal is the driver for this construct. That's why you can't. I didn't know before then why you cancel goal. I knew it worked, but I didn't understand how it worked. I couldn't explain it to anybody. I just, you know, actually in the early days when I first started to work with the Aramaic forgiveness process, I was teaching other work, and I would once in a while mention canceling a goal, and it wasn't all that meaningful to me. And over a period of time, I had two or three people that came to me and said, you know, I've been doing that goal canceling camp. That's really powerful. That's really changed some things for me. I was kind of like, oh, really? Okay, well, and that's when I started to really work with that. But then the next level of it came recognizing that when I think or speak as though something out there is a cause of what's moving in here, I have to formulate a lie. And I create this unnatural condition
Oh.
called an unconscious mind. I'm saying to my mind, I know we've got this in there, but I am not willing to look at it. You are not allowed to use that as evidence to show me. You have to hallucinate for me a picture about how they're the cause of it. I have dissociated and cut myself off from that. And until that dissociation ends, people function out of the unconscious mind. And my take is it's not even natural for us to have an unconscious mind. The whole idea of the unconscious mind is an aberration.
Right.
And yet, according to psychologists, it runs 90, 95, 98% of our so-called thinking. That's how deeply locked in our culture is to denial and dissociation.
Well, and when you think of how much religion builds up this idea that, um, basically, you're going to get punished. If you're at fault, you're going to get punished. So why would I be willing to be at fault? I need somebody else to blame. I mean, and it just takes us further out of the idea that we're creators.
Yes. And my take, and you maybe you've heard me say this before, maybe you haven't. I've been saying this for a long time now on the radio show, but my take is that the average person in this culture today, literally by the age of 4, they are very devout, religious, card-carrying members of the one world universal religion of blame.
Right. I love it.
I mean, by 4,
It's really
everybody's learned, not me, them.
Yep.
And then, I mean, you look at the 78-year-old 4-year-olds out there that are puking on everybody, blaming everybody else, proclaiming how powerful they are and how wealthy they are and how rich they are and how successful they are, and they got to puke on everybody else for everything that's wrong in their lives. Because they're still like 4-year-olds living in, the one world universal religion of blame. And that means that when we live in that blame game, everything our mind shows us is a lie. Everything. And yet, I don't know, 98% of the people in the culture live in the lie and think that's just the way it is. My mind showed it to me. Look, I saw it. Yeah, you saw it, but you didn't realize it was painted on the inside of your eyeballs. It was coming from your own mind. It isn't out there the way you see it. It's only in here. That's why you're in pain, because you're holding energetic patterns that don't belong. You got to stop this language of blame and recognize and move into responsibility communication out of projection communication. It's such a core principle. But most people, unfortunately, don't stay.
Are you there? Hello, hello. I think I just got cut off again.
Me. I'm here.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's just such a reversal of blame, in that it's somebody outside of me, is such a reversal of us knowing that we're creators. I created that, but instead, and you're right, it is kind of the theme probably among 90% of the religions in the world, that they were structured to create a reverse picture of who we really are. And I mean, I don't know.
Well, you look through the scriptures, and at least 300 times there's a very clear instruction to do away with fear. Fear not, fear not, fear not. It's said over and over and over and over and over again. And yet there are people out there, supposedly at the top of the religious heap, that are saying to us, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. You want to talk about a reversal? These are people supposedly speaking from the scriptures,
right,
representing the scriptures, and yet the very thing that over 300 times we're told to get rid of, they're saying that's how you get smart. And you point that fear at God. I mean, it's bizarre. But that's how the mind in denial works, is it believes the bizarre. It can't even see it.
Yep. Here we are, ready to live in new ways to
Yes, joining you in that 2000%.
Yep. Well, thanks so much, Michael. I really appreciate your ongoing work in this field that is just really incredible over so many years, and that you have the detailed mind to keep unraveling it at the level that you have. I just thank you so much.
Well, I'll say that, for me, I mean, I get a new insight. Oftentimes it happens on the show because of what somebody else brings in. And I mean, it's like I'm as excited as a little kid. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for over 50 years now, but every new nugget is like, oh my God, oh, right on. That's it. So profound. And to me, it's just as exciting as the first time I discovered forgiveness. So, it's easy to stay with it, and each piece just opens a whole new. It's like a whole new vista opens every time you make another discovery in this quantum world.
Yes.
So joining you in carrying it forward and getting it to the point of critical mass, so it literally becomes available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet.
Yes, yes, yes. And all the, hold on, I have a truck going by, a little noisy out there. Uh, all the people of the future from the great age of enlightenment, the golden age of enlightenment, look back and say, thank you so much for holding the space for this work to happen, for making it available, visible, and accessible to all of us.
We stand on the shoulders of giants for sure.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm
All
going
right,
to
young
sign
lady.
off. Take
Okay.
care. Many blessings to you guys.
All right. Take
Ciao.
care. Bye bye. So again, delighted that you're with us. If you're out there in listener land, if you have a question or a thought, you've got the chat room to put a note into the comments. If anything of any of that conversation stirred or stimulated a question, you can certainly pop that question into the comments. Or if it's more detailed, if you'd like to have a conversation about it, then hit the call button. If you happen to have gotten this notice and the notice gave you a link and you went to the link, you're listening to the show on a web page, which means you can't interact, you can't write comments, and you can't call in. But if you look at the top of that page, you'll see that there's a link at the top for an Android phone and a link for an iPhone. If you click whichever your phone is, that will take you directly to the Needle, Nedl Studio app, or pardon me, the Needle app, and you just download Needle and you sign in. They're very private with the information, and select Mindshifters Radio as a favorite. That way you'll get a notification each day when the shows begin, and then open the app and we're having a conversation. So if you have a question or thought for us, click that call button. Put something in the app. Last caller's questions are helpful. Jane, one of the games of our egos is thinking that, oh, I have a problem that nobody else has. The fact is, we're all the same. There's nobody that's really any different. And so, yeah, that to me is one of the beauties of the show. And it's one of the reasons why I ask people to ask questions, because if you've gone through something that I do not yet comprehend, and you ask your question about it in the context of this work, I get to learn from you. I get to learn what that particular situation is. So the questions are so important. I love it. I love it. There's a story about Albert Einstein, and he was asked the question that if he were given a problem to solve, that if he did not solve it, he would die, and he had 10 minutes. I think it was 10 minutes. What would he do with his time? And what he replied is, I'd spend 9 minutes asking questions about the problem, and then I'd solve the problem in 1 minute. My numbers might be off there, but basically, his answer was, I'm going to be asking questions for 99% of the time. And so for me, having done this full time for the last half century, I've gotten to engage in so many people's questions. If you go and take a look at the acknowledgments in my book, there are over 500 names there, literally because each of those persons with their question, with their process, with their learning, teaching me, made the contributions that brought the book, Why Is This Happening to Me, again, together. So Thank you for being part of the process. And we're down to just the last minute or two. And since there are no questions or comments, I'll just say that we do have a couple of spaces yet in the quantum still point session that I'm doing starting on the 2nd of March. So next Friday, pardon me, next Sunday will be the first day of that. The Sunday, the spaces we've got are filled. There is one opening that comes up Wednesday afternoon for someone to do a 3 or 5 day quantum still point. So if you're interested in that, drop Jeanie an email, or if you've got my number, call me. I'll be delighted to chat with you. Or you can drop Jeanie an email, JEANIE at WHYagain.org. And also, we are moving forward with a 9-day Why Is This Happening to Me Again intensive in Abingdon, Virginia, which is just about 15 minutes up the road from us in Bristol. There's a really awesome retreat center that we've used before. So we're planning that residential Why Is This Happening to Me Again intensive, where we cover the workshops, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, Healing Through Relationships, Purpose, Personal Power, and Commitment Empowered to Heal, hands-on energy field work, mind shifters, and still point breathing. So that's what will be covered. So residential workshop, food, accommodations, workshop materials. And so if you're interested in that, that's going to start on the 22nd of May. Flyers are on the website. And if you have an inquiry, drop Jeanie a note. In the meantime, have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Appreciate you and blessings. Bye-bye.